strong message. Vice President Pence threatens Turkey over a detained American pastor. Trade talk. President Trump arrives in Dubuque, Iowa to cheers amid concerns over his administration's tariffs. Medical milestone. The Vatican's Children's Hospital is celebrating. We have a report from Rome. And Helping Hand. Catholic Charities in action on the U.S.-Mexico border. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, July 26, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. President Donald Trump and Vice President Mike Pence are threatening to hit Turkey, a NATO ally, with significant sanctions tonight. They're demanding the government release Andrew Brunson, a Christian pastor who they say has been falsely accused of spying and supporting terrorism. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reports from day 3 of the Religious Freedom Ministerial at the State Department. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. The vice president is repeating his calls to the Turkish president, Erdogan, to free Andrew Brunson immediately. Now, it was this week that the American pastor was released from his prison where he's been since 2016, but now he's under house arrest, and Pence says that's not good enough.
I spoke to Pastor Brunson and his wife, Noreen, yesterday. I know that his faith will sustain him, but it shouldn't have to. Pastor Andrew Brunson deserves to be free.
Vice President Pence getting a round of applause from dozens of faith leaders gathered for the final day of a State Department conference on religious freedom. His comments followed the president's own appeal for Brunson's freedom, tweeting, "The United States will impose large sanctions on Turkey for their longtime detainment of Pastor Andrew Brunson, a great Christian, family man, and wonderful human being. He is suffering greatly. This innocent man of faith should be released immediately." The 50-year-old evangelical Christian, originally from North Carolina, was put under house arrest Wednesday after a year and a half in jail. The vice president also singled out countries where religious freedom is under threat, including Nicaragua.
But government-backed mobs armed with machetes and even heavy weapons have attacked parishes and church properties, and bishops and priests have been physically assaulted by the police.
Pence also mentioned Iraq.
The suffering of Yazidi people and all the victims of ISIS has sickened the American people and mobilized this president and this administration to action.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo promises more help to Christians and other religious minorities resettling their homes in northern Iraq. The United States is committing an additional $17 million as part of a new genocide recovery and persecution response program. That's on top of the $90 million the U.S. already provided this year.
The additional funding will help us make more progress in clearing minds from areas with large population of religious minorities who were subject to ISIS genocide.
Turkey is responding to the vice president and the secretary of state today, and Turkish officials saying it's unacceptable for them to threaten their country and saying it's well within their right to hold Andrew Brunson under house arrest. This comes as the State Department is hosting its first conference on advancing religious freedom, but it will not be its last. Today, the vice president and the secretary of state announced that they will make this an annual event. Lauren?
What are countries doing to move from talk to action?
Well, Lauren, we heard from several different countries today, all proposing this idea about creating their own representative or their ambassador in order to advance religious freedom domestically as well as abroad. The position here in the United States would be similar to what is held by Sam Brownback today, but the key word that they talked about with regards to this situation is plurality, this idea of where people of different faiths can come together and coexist freely. In addition, the vice president also talked about countries participating in the new International Religious Freedom Fund and invited them all to partake in that as well. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reporting from the State Department. Thank you, Wyatt. President Trump is claiming a trade breakthrough with European allies as he visits the Midwest. The president says U.S. farmers will benefit from his agreement with the European Union to tear down trade barriers. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. After being criticized for inciting a trade war with allies, the president is now receiving some praise for this agreement. Farmers remain concerned about tariffs, but the president says they will now have access to a big new market.
We just opened up Europe for you farmers. You're not going to be too angry with Trump, I can tell you, because you were essentially, wouldn't you say, Kim, they were restricted from dealing in Europe. You had barriers that really made it impossible for farm products to go in.
President Trump promises his trade policies will be good for Americans after a visit to a manufacturing lab in Iowa and a steel factory in Illinois. On the international stage, trade relations may be improving. Today, the head of the European Central Bank is calling an agreement to hold off on new tariffs a good sign. And the president says it's good for free and fair trade.
We agreed today, first of all, to work together towards zero tariffs, zero non-tariff barriers, and zero subsidies on non-auto industrial goods.
But this week, the Trump administration announced a $12 billion temporary aid package for farmers. Critics had predicted the president's tariffs would ultimately hurt them.
I'm not for bailouts.
Congressman David Young, a Republican from Iowa, says he isn't happy about the aid, and neither are farmers. They are worried that a global trade war and tariffs will result in job loss.
This is coming from the effect of what the administration has done, and it's an admonition that tariffs are harming agriculture and harming farmers. And so it's not what they prefer.
Though the details of the agreement between the U.S. and the EU are vague, the president insists it will benefit American farmers. He tweets, "European Union representatives told me that they would start buying soybeans from our great farmers immediately. Also, they will be buying vast amounts of LNG." The U.S.-European Union agreement does nothing to resolve America's conflicts with the rest of the world. Other trading partners, including Canada, Japan, Mexico, and South Korea, still face the threat of auto tariffs, which could go into effect as early as September. Lauren?
Mark, what's the current status of the president's imposed tariffs on steel and aluminum?
Well, as we heard the president say, the U.S. is working toward resolving those tariffs with the European Union, but they currently remain in place. And the U.S. is still locked in trade disputes with China. The Trump administration has imposed tariffs on $34 billion in Chinese goods in a dispute over Beijing's high-tech industrial policies. Lauren?
White House correspondent Mark Irons, thank you. Republican Jim Jordan of Ohio says he's running next year to become House Speaker. Jordan is a founder of the House Freedom Caucus. He says President Trump has taken, quote, bold action, but Congress has not fulfilled its end of the deal. Jordan is a former assistant wrestling coach at Ohio State. He denies claims he knew wrestlers were abused. A small group of House Republicans are pushing to impeach Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Representative Mark Meadows yesterday introduced the proposal. Rosenstein is the Justice Department official overseeing Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into possible Russian election interference. It's unclear whether the move will go anywhere, and at least one GOP leader says he does not support the effort. President Trump's top national security aides are deflecting accusations the president is too soft on Russia. Senators on the Foreign Relations Committee fired off tough questions about last week's Trump-Putin meeting. Today, they are still looking for answers. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi reports on the testimony. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says it's not his place to reveal what Presidents Trump and Putin covered during their nearly 2-hour meeting in Helsinki. He defended the president's right to hold private talks with foreign leaders. Another topic Pompeo was grilled on, North Korea and its controversial nuclear program.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo this month negotiated in North Korea. Now he negotiates with senators.
I'm engaged in a complex negotiation with the North Koreans, and so I don't intend in this public setting to share the details of every conversation that took place in those.
Senators questioned America's top diplomat about President Trump's meeting last month with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un.
So far, they seem to be walking back any commitment.
I don't think it's fair to characterize them walking back from commitments. There have been public reports, and I know the United States is tracking the disassembly of a missile engine test site.
Senators from both parties praised Pompeo for his work on behalf of American pastor Andrew Brunson, who faces terror and spying charges in Turkey.
It is a positive step, and thank you for that.
Jean Shaheen, a Democrat from New Hampshire, visited Pastor Brunson in June. Today, she tells us she wants Turkey held accountable.
And I think it's very important to send that strong message to Turkey. This is a NATO ally. Their relationship is important to us, but they cannot imprison American citizens who are innocent on trumped-up charges.
Republican Senator James Lankford is urging the Trump administration to act and says sanctions will be effective.
I think limiting our interchange between Turkey and the United States is entirely appropriate. So Turkey has basically said, what are we going to get for Pastor Brunson? I think the correct response should be, what you're going to get is sanctions.
Democrats complain that the secretary dodged their questions. Senator Shaheen says she heard nothing substantive from the secretary about what are the next steps in North Korean negotiations. But Senator Lankford tells me the secretary has to be careful and can't give away too much publicly. Lauren?
Well, Secretary Pompeo didn't divulge the content of the Putin-Trump meeting, and I asked the secretary if there will be transcripts. He said no. Will the American public ever find out what was said, even broad outlines?
Well, that's a good question. The only 4 people that know are the 2 translators and then the 2 world leaders. So far, no official summary, which is called a readout here in Washington. No readout has been released, no transcript. And right now, it seems like Secretary Pompeo is saying, hey, this is the right of the president to have these private meetings, and that's a private conversation.
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi, thank you. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee approves a prominent Catholic as ambassador to Fiji. Joe Sella founded the National Catholic Prayer Breakfast and is co-founder of the movement Catholic Vote. He also served on President Trump's campaign as an advisor on faith-related issues. 30 people have come forward alleging sexual abuse by the monks and a lay faculty at a Catholic school in New Jersey. The alleged abuse took place at Del Barton School in Morristown. The Order of St. Benedict, which runs the school, has settled 8 lawsuits. 7 more are pending. At least 5 children are dead after a severe flood hits a Rohingya refugee camp in Bangladesh. The heavy rains forced 1,000 people to relocate. Monsoons generally peak at this time of year. A man explodes a small homemade bomb outside the U.S. Embassy in Beijing. Police say the 26-year-old was the only one injured. A spokesman says there is no damage to embassy property. No word on a motive. Police continue to investigate. A cricket star turned politician is poised to become Prime Minister of Pakistan. Imran Khan's supporters took to the street in celebration. Results are not expected to be made official until tomorrow. Allegations of fraud have marred the voting. Khan maintains a commanding lead. He says, thanks to God, we won. He promises a new Pakistan. That message resonated in a country where nearly 2/3 of the voters are below the age of 30, and reportedly many women were shut out of voting. A cardinal in Chile accused of covering up abuse faces protesters and calls for his resignation. Cardinal Ricardo Azadi celebrated Mass at the cathedral in Santiago last night. He is one of around 160 members of the church being investigated for accusations of committing or concealing sexual abuse there. The sex scandal in Chile prompted Pope Francis earlier this year to publicly denounce a culture of abuse and cover-up. One of the Holy Father's closest advisors is criticizing a proposed law requiring Italian ports of entry and other public institutions to display a crucifix. Father Antonio Spadaro says the cross should not be used for political ends. The bill was drafted by Italy's Conservative League party, headed by Interior Minister Matteo Salvini. The crucifix debate is the latest dust-up over migration that has riled the Catholic Church in Italy. For the first time in its history, the Vatican's Children's Hospital has used gene therapy to cure a 4-year-old boy who has leukemia.
So the approach is pretty easy. We take blood from our patients and then we do a genetic modification inducing the expression of a protein that help the T cells to recognize the leukemia.
I'm glad she's doing that job. I certainly couldn't understand a thing she was talking about. Dr. Concetta Quintarelli, head of the Cell and Gene Therapy Lab at Bambino Gesù in Rome, tells us the child is in complete remission. Gene therapy is an experimental technique using genes to treat or prevent disease. Vatican correspondent Juliette Lindley has more from Rome.
Lauren, Bambino Gesù is calling the success a milestone. In 2012, a 7-year-old girl with leukemia in Philadelphia was successfully treated using that same gene therapy, but researchers here at the Vatican-run hospital say this is different. Now, Lauren, gene therapy has gained attention recently as a medical breakthrough, but the scientific technique also raises ethical questions. So the National Catholic Bioethics Center says this specific gene therapy aligns with Catholic teaching because it only uses matured cells from the patient. Now, Bambino Gesù is owned by the Vatican, and as you may recall, Lauren, the hospital offered to take in the 2 English children, Charlie Gard and Alfie Evans, during their illnesses. They weren't allowed to leave the UK for treatment, and they passed away in Britain. More than 100 doctors and researchers are working on this project, and Dr. Quintarelli tells us the therapy is currently being used on 8 other children with similar illnesses. And just a final note, a spokesperson at the hospital says that Pope Francis was notified of this good news here in Rome. Juliette Lindley, EWTN News Nightly.
Coming up, what we can expect from the State Department's Conference to Advance Religious Freedom. And a policy expert weighs in on the Trump administration's stance on immigration. The State Department wrapped up its first conference on religious freedom today. Delegates from almost 80 countries participated. And joining us now is Father Andre Mahana, who was there and took part in the conference. He's from Lebanon. He's the U.S. President of the Apostolic Union of Clergy. Father, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so very much.
Did this event solidify America's role as a leader in the fight to defend religious freedom?
Absolutely, not only as a leader, it raised it up to its spiritual destiny and its original foundation. Religious freedom was the very first right the fathers established.
As we heard earlier, Vice President Pence announced an International Religious Freedom Fund, the Genocide, Recovery, and Persecution Response Program. How will this help?
This will help because it shows United States is being balanced and just with everybody. It recognizes as a nation that all nations, all people from all religions suffered equally, yet we want to take care of the victims on all front lines, basically. When they say 88% of world population are suffering religious oppression and persecution, 88% of the human race.
Where's that number from, Father?
That number from the Open Doors, from the Pew Forum, from the NGOs that we met with for 2-3 days, researchers of years, the international, the USA Commission on International Religious Freedom, the countries' reports that we get. You know, United States has been spending a lot of time and resources and intelligence, actually, and communication to get numbers like this.
Well, in Lebanon, let's talk about Christian persecution there, where you are from. You went back in June, I think. Correct. I heard. Correct. And let's talk about what you've noticed there. What's the Catholic Church doing there?
The Catholic Church there is honestly battling for life, along with the Orthodox churches, the local Muslim community, the local Yazidis, the local refugees, 1.5 million Syrian refugees alone. You have about 125 Iraqi and Syrian minorities, Christians and Yazidis, no papers, no passports, no benefits, no UN help at all whatsoever laid on the streets. So we took a delegation with Bishop Elias Zaiden, my beautiful bishop from the Maronite Eparchy of Our Lady of Lebanon, Bishop Gregory Mansour from our Maronite Eparchy in New York, and the delegation of Archbishop Sam Aquila, Bishop Broglio, Bishop Solis.
And what did you do there?
What we did, we visited with the refugees, we visited with the Lebanese government officials, we visited with the religious community officials.
Anything come out of it?
Yes, we knew where the difficulties are with the dialogue, definitely, but also we gave lots of hope. the presence of American clergy, the American church, come in that big church to help the little church. It was an amazing message of hope by itself. We met with municipalities as well, actually.
Thank you so much for all you do for religious freedom. Father Andre Mahana, thank you so much.
Thank you so very much.
Tonight on EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, a message for parents expecting a baby with Down syndrome.
I would tell them congratulations. And to expect happiness and success. To learn to slow down and experience the joy.
Video of that gentleman, Frank Stevens, who has Down syndrome, went viral last year after he testified on Capitol Hill. You can see Catherine Hadrow's interview tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern on EWTN. Up next, Catholic Charities lends a hand to families being reunited on the U.S.-Mexico border. Plus, Ireland gives the upcoming visit by Pope Francis a stamps of approval. The effort to reunite thousands of children separated from their parents at the U.S.-Mexico border by today's court-imposed deadline is expected to fall short. Catholic Charities is on the ground helping return children to their parents. This is one of their facilities in San Antonio. Other faith-based groups are also pitching in, providing food, clothing, and a place to stay. Joining me now is Rachel Bovard, Senior Director of Policy, at the Conservative Partnership Institute. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
The government has said almost 1,200 have been reunited, but they don't know the exact number of children who haven't been reunited. How is that possible?
Well, based on arguments they made before the court, they're having trouble identifying which parents have already either left voluntarily or been deported. And so that seems to be the issue, is parents that have already left, sometimes voluntarily, sometimes being deported, and who those kids belong to. So that seems to be the last wrinkle they're trying to iron out.
Members of the Hispanic Caucus say that they met with the Department of Homeland Security, Kirstjen Nielsen, yesterday, and that she told them that they are going to cut 1% across the board from its programs to pay for family separations and detentions. Combined with the point you just made, this zero tolerance policy by the Trump administration, was it well thought out?
I do think they had some serious implementation problems. You know, I think it was a resource question, and it kind of goes to the comment that Secretary Nielsen made to the Hispanic Caucus. They simply don't have the resources to keep these families together, to incarcerate this many people. Even though they are within their legal rights to do so, you've seen other administrations try and fail at this question simply because there's no resources, including space, beds, money, all the things that kind of go into this. So you do think it wasn't quite well thought through when it was implemented in the beginning.
When I was at the border of Laredo in Texas, I spoke to a lot of Border Patrol agents who told me they want a wall. And President Trump has said that he is vowing to veto any stopgap measures that do not fund a border wall. Are we headed for a political showdown on this?
I do think that's entirely possible. You saw Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Speaker Paul Ryan go meet with Trump yesterday to discuss this very issue, where we are with funding. It doesn't look like the Congress is going to get all their bills passed by the end of the fiscal year. So we're in a situation where we very well could see a shutdown, particularly over this issue. The president has said he wants a wall. Senate Democrats have said no way. So
we've been here before. We have seen this movie.
Yes.
A Gallup poll released last week lists immigration as the top problem facing America. As we enter the midterms, who does that help? Democrats or Republicans?
I think it really depends on how this plays out in September. When we get to this funding battle, I think we're going to see all types of issues spring up on this in immigration, not just the wall. We're going to talk about family separation. We're going to talk about DACA. All these issues are going to come to a forefront. I think parties are going to be jostling to get in front of it, but it is going to be an immigration midterm.
Thank you so much. We heard it here first, an immigration midterm. Rachel Bovard, Senior Director of Policy at the Conservative Partnership Institute. And finally tonight, Ireland releases stamps celebrating the World Meeting of Families. One shows Pope Francis. He is set to attend the summit next month in Dublin. All 500,000 tickets for his outdoor mass, forget about it, they are gone. Archbishop Dermot Martin thanks the Irish Post for a fitting tribute to what he hopes is a memorable visit. That does it for all of us here at EWTN News Nightly. I try to say it in an Irish accent, but I know I would fail miserably. Top of the morning, that's all I can do. All right, anyway, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. Good night and God bless.